I sat in my favorite armchair by the window, watching the October rain hit the glass of my home in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston. This had been my home for 40 years. Every room filled with memories I'd built with my late husband, Walter. 3 years had passed since cancer took him, and I still felt him in every corner of this house. My name is Sylvia Brennan. I'm 68 years old, and I've never been a woman who gives up easily. I worked as an accountant at a state company for 35 years, raised my son Derek on my own when Walter was sick, and I'd always been proud of my independence. My pension isn't large, but I have savings that Walter and I accumulated our entire lives, and this house that we bought before prices became astronomical. Derek's wedding to Shannon Aldridge 5 years ago should have been the happiest day of my life. I remember how she looked in her wedding dress at the ceremony at Trinity Church, her perfect smiling face turned toward my son. I thought I'd gained the daughter I never had. How wrong I was. The first signs that something wasn't right, I noticed about a year ago. Subtle comments that Shannon would drop at family dinners. How it seemed I was struggling to remember where I'd put my keys. How I'd missed Derek's birthday, even though I'd arrived exactly on time. How, at my age, women often became confused and forgetful. Derek would gently correct her, but I noticed how the seed of doubt was slowly being planted. My son, my boy who had grown into a man I was so proud of, started looking at me differently, more worried, as if I'd become fragile, incompetent. Then things started disappearing. Small things at first. My reading glasses that I was sure I'd left on the nightstand. A photograph of Walter and me from our honeymoon in Cape Cod, which had stood on the shelf for years. My favorite lavender brooch that Walter bought me at a boutique on Newberry Street, when happier days were our reality. I attributed it to my age, though something deep down gnawed at me. I'd always been an organized woman, carefully keeping track of my things, but maybe Shannon was right. Maybe old age was finally catching up with me. The turning point came on a warm September day. Shannon came to visit, bringing fresh apple pie that she said she'd picked up from a bakery in Cambridge. I was grateful. Since Walter died, the feeling of loneliness would often overwhelm me, especially on weekends. I made coffee and we sat at my old kitchen table. We talked about everyday things. Shannon's job at a marketing agency in the financial district, how she was thinking about children, how Derek was busy at his job at the construction company. Then the question came, seemingly innocent. "Sylvia, have you thought about maybe having a little help around here?" she said, her dark brown eyes looking at me with what seemed like concern. "What kind of help?" I asked, confused. "Well, someone who could come a few times a week. A cleaning lady, maybe. Or..." She paused, as if carefully choosing her words. "Someone who could make sure you don't forget to take your medications, that you have food in the fridge." "I have everything I need," I replied, feeling my irritation rise. "I'm not an invalid, Shannon." "Of course you're not," she said quickly. "But Derek and I are worried. You're not young anymore, and this house is too big for one person. 3 bedrooms, stairs to the 3rd floor with no elevator. I've lived here for 40 years. I interrupted her in a sharper tone than I intended. "I know every step of these stairs. This is my home." "I see," she said quietly, lowering her gaze. "We just want what's best for you." After she left, I sat alone in silence, listening to the clock ticking on the living room wall. Walter's grandfather had left it to him, an old mechanical clock from Germany that had survived both wars. The ticking usually comforted me, reminding me of continuity, of things that endure. That day it sounded like a countdown. Maybe I'd become paranoid, but I started noticing a pattern. Shannon would come to visit, always alone, always with some little gift or excuse, and always after her visits, something would be strange. A document would be in the wrong place. My bottle of blood pressure pills would be nearly empty, though I was sure I'd just refilled it. Once I even found the balcony door open, though I was absolutely certain I'd locked it before bed. I started keeping notes. An old notebook that Walter used for his technical drawings, now filled with my entries, date and time of Shannon's visits, what was missing or different afterward. At first, writing it seemed crazy, paranoid, but as the weeks passed, the pattern became undeniably clear. On October 17th, Shannon came around 4 in the afternoon. She brought cookies from a local bakery. After she left, my bank statement book had been moved in the drawer, though I never take it out. On October 21st, she came in the morning, saying she was in the neighborhood on her way to work. That evening, I noticed the photo album from our wedding was on the bottom shelf. Not the top shelf where I always keep it. But the strangest thing happened the last week of October. Shannon called me on the phone, sounding upset. "Sylvia, you need to be more careful," she said. "Derek got a bill from your bank account. You bought some very strange things online. Luxury clothing, jewelry. Don't you remember?" My heart started pounding. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't buy anything online. I haven't even learned how to do that." "The bill is from your bank," she insisted. "Maybe you clicked on something accidentally. That happens to older people a lot." I immediately called my bank. A kind young representative assured me there had been no unusual transactions on my account in the last 6 months. Everything was normal. Why would Shannon lie about that? That night I slept poorly, tossing and turning in bed, listening to the wind whistle through the old window frames. Walter would know what to do. He'd always been smarter at judging people than me. He often told me, "Sylvia, you see too much good in people. Not everyone can be good." The next morning, I made a decision. If something was really happening, I needed to know. I couldn't live in uncertainty, doubting my own sanity. I called my friend Beatrice Morrison, whom I've known since elementary school in a small town near Worcester where I grew up. She now lives in Boston, in Dorchester, and we regularly have coffee every Tuesday at a cafe in Faneuil Hall. "B, I need your help." I told her when we met that afternoon. I told her everything. The doubts, the strange things, Shannon's visits. Beatrice listened carefully, her weathered face serious as I spoke. "I believe you," she said finally. "You're not a woman who makes things up, Sylvia. I've known you for 50 years. Your mind is as sharp as ever. What should I do?" I asked, feeling my eyes moisten with relief that someone believed me. "We need to find out what she's planning," Beatrice said decisively, "and that means we need to be smarter than her." Chapter 2. Gathering Evidence. Beatrice's words gave me strength I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a forgetful old woman losing her mind. Something was really happening, and finally I had an ally. The next day, Beatrice came back to my apartment with a black plastic bag. We sat at the kitchen table while outside the November rain began to fall, typical for Boston at this time of year, heavy and persistent. "I have something for you," she said, pulling a small device from the bag. "My grandson Marcus works at an electronics store. This is a small camera, with a battery that lasts weeks. We can hide it here in the apartment." I looked at the tiny black box, no bigger than a matchbox. I felt like I'd entered some crime film, but what choice did I have? If Shannon was really planning something, I needed proof. "Where do we put it?" I asked. Beatrice walked around the apartment, carefully observing. Finally, she stopped in the living room, looking toward the shelf where I keep Walter's books and the old clock. "Here," she said, pointing to a space between 2 books. "From here, it can record most of the room, including the entrance and part of the kitchen. If she's really coming in and touching your things, we'll catch her." We spent the next hour setting up the camera. Beatrice was surprisingly handy for a 70-year-old woman. When we finished, the camera was completely invisible, perfectly blended between Walter's collection of American history books. "Now we wait," Beatrice said, "and we're careful." That week, life went on normally. I went on my regular walk to the Boston Public Market every morning, buying fresh vegetables and exchanging pleasantries with the vendors I'd known for years. "Mrs. Brennan, how are you today?" Joseph, the tomato vendor, would ask. I loved these little moments of normalcy, while everything else in my life had become so strange. Shannon called on Thursday, her voice cheerful and carefree over the phone. "Sylvia, Derek, and I are coming for lunch on Sunday. Can I bring something?" "No need," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll make pot roast, Derek's favorite." "Wonderful. Can't wait." As I prepared the pot roast on Saturday, carefully seasoning the meat and chopping vegetables, I thought about all the Sunday dinners through the years. How many times had I stood in this kitchen, preparing meals for my family? How much love had I put into every dish? Walter would often come up behind me while I cooked, wrapping his arms around me and kissing my neck. "Smells like heaven, Sylvia," he'd say. I'm the luckiest man in the world. Those memories hurt more than ever that day. Sunday came with a bright, cold morning. The sun broke through low clouds, casting pale golden light on the city streets. I put the roast in to cook early, its rich aroma filling the apartment. I set the table with our best china, the ones we only used for special occasions. Derek and Shannon arrived exactly at 1 o'clock. My son looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, but he smiled when he hugged me. "Mom, the smell is incredible," he said. "I haven't had your pot roast in months." "You work too much," I said, touching his face. "You need to take better care of yourself." "I take care of him," Shannon said, entering behind him. I brought wine. Her smile was perfect, her teeth white and straight. She wore an expensive leather jacket I hadn't seen before, probably worth several months of pension. Lunch passed pleasantly. On the surface, we talked about ordinary things. Derek's job was busy. They were building a new residential complex in South Boston. Shannon had gotten a promotion at her agency. The weather had been unusually warm for November, but I noticed how Shannon watched me. Her eyes would linger on my hands as I cut bread, as if looking for signs of trembling. When I told a story I'd told before, there was a flash of satisfaction in her expression. After lunch, while I was clearing the table, Derek came into the kitchen alone. "Mom, I need to ask you something," he said quietly, glancing toward the living room where Shannon sat. My heart jumped. "What is it, son?" "Shannon is worried about you." "And I am too, honestly. I've noticed some things. You repeat yourself in conversations. You forgot to come to my birthday last month." "I was there." I interrupted him. "I arrived with a cake I made, chocolate and hazelnut, just how you like it." He looked confused. "Mom, my birthday was on October 19th. You came on the 20th. I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. My notebook. I'd checked it carefully. Derek's birthday was marked October 19th. I was absolutely sure. Maybe your mom is just a little confused about dates," Shannon said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "That's normal at her age, Derek. We don't need to make her feel bad about it." "I'm not confused," I said firmly. "I know when my son's birthday is, but I wasn't sure anymore." Doubt gnawed at my mind. Had I really gotten the date wrong? Or was this another part of Shannon's plan? After they left, I sat on my couch, trembling. I pulled out my notebook, reviewing the pages. Derek's birthday, October 19th, clearly written in my hand. But then I saw something. The ink was different, a slightly lighter blue than the rest of the entries on that page. I ran my finger over it. The number 9 had been written over something else. Holding the page up to the light, I could see faint traces of the number 2 underneath. She changed it. Shannon had entered my apartment, found my notebook, and changed the date. How deep had she gone? How many times had she entered while I was out? I called Beatrice immediately. "We need to look at the recordings," I said, my voice shaking with anger and fear. Beatrice came within half an hour, bringing her laptop. We sat together on the couch, connecting the camera to the computer. We started reviewing footage from the last week. First day, nothing unusual, just me, moving around my apartment, reading, watching television. Second day, I recorded myself leaving in the morning for my walk. The apartment was empty for several hours. Then, around 10 o'clock, the door opened. Shannon entered. My breath caught in my throat. I watched as my daughter-in-law, this woman I'd considered a daughter, quietly entered my apartment. She had a key. How did she get a key? On the screen, Shannon went directly to my bedroom. She returned a few minutes later with my notebook. She sat at my kitchen table, carefully opening the page. She pulled a pen from her purse and started writing something. "She's changing the date," Beatrice whispered. "I can see it." We watched as Shannon methodically went through several pages, making small changes. Then she stood up, looked around as if making sure everything was in place, and left. We continued watching. There were more visits. On Wednesday, Shannon came again while I was at the doctor for a routine checkup. This time she photographed documents from my drawer, including my bank statement book and the will that Walter and I had drawn up before his death. "She's building a case against you," Beatrice said, her face pale. "She's trying to make you look incompetent." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd always known it, deep in my heart, but I hadn't wanted to believe it. "Your house," Beatrice said quietly. "Your savings. If they declare you incompetent, Derek will get guardianship over your property. And if she manipulates him, she can take everything." I finished the sentence. We sat in silence, the weight of the discovery settling over us, like the winter darkness falling outside the window. Chapter 3. Uncovering the Past. The following week was one of the longest in my life. Every morning I'd wake with a heavy feeling in my stomach, thinking about the recordings we'd seen. Shannon, this woman who had sat at my table, eaten my food, called me Mom, was systematically working to destroy my life, but I wasn't a woman who just sat and watched. If Shannon was building a case against me, I needed to know more about her. Who was she really before she entered our lives? Beatrice and I met again on Thursday afternoon at a small cafe near the Boston Common, far from my neighborhood where someone might recognize us. We ordered coffee and apple pie, but neither of us ate, too worried for conversation. "My nephew Lucas works in the police department," Beatrice said quietly, leaning across the table. "He's not in Boston, but he has access to some databases." I asked him to discreetly check Shannon's background, and I asked, holding my coffee cup so tightly my knuckles turned white. Beatrice pulled a paper from her bag, folded small. Shannon's background wasn't what she'd presented it to be. Her full name was Shannon Marie Aldridge, born in Miami 36 years ago. I already knew that, but what I didn't know was that she'd had a marriage before Derek. She was married. I asked, shocked. "She never mentioned that to us." Beatrice nodded. "She married at 24 to a man from Miami, an entrepreneur 20 years older than her. The marriage lasted only 3 years. He died of a heart attack, leaving her, I assumed, a large amount of money." Beatrice confirmed. "A house on the coast. Savings. But it was all gone in less than 2 years. Debts, bad investments, spent on expensive things. When she arrived in Boston, she had almost nothing. I understood suddenly. She found Derek, my son, with a good job, stable income, a mother who owned a house in the center of the city worth a lot of money in today's market. "I'm not just an investment," I said bitterly. "I'm an obstacle." Beatrice grabbed my hand across the table. "We need to be very careful, Sylvia. This woman is dangerous. If she discovers we know—" "I know," I said, "but I can't just wait for her to destroy my life. I need to talk to Derek." "I think that would be a mistake," Beatrice said cautiously. "If you tell him now, without solid evidence, Shannon will turn everything around. She'll say you're paranoid, that it proves you're losing your mind. Derek loves you, but he also loves his wife. He won't believe you right away." I knew she was right, which hurt more than I'd ever admit. My son, the boy I'd raised alone, whom I'd protected through childhood illnesses and broken bones, teenage heartbreaks and difficult exams, whom I'd held while he cried at Walter's funeral. That son might choose her over me. "Then what do you suggest?" I asked. "We need more information. We need to understand her entire plan. And we need evidence that's so clear Derek can't deny the truth." We spent the next few days thoroughly preparing. Beatrice used her contacts, a friend who worked in city administration, another whose son was a lawyer. Slowly we built a picture of Shannon's life before Derek. The more we discovered, the sicker I felt. Her first husband, Andrew Hartman, had been a fairly healthy 47-year-old man when the heart attack suddenly killed him. He had no previous health problems. The official investigation found nothing suspicious, but Andrew's brother was never convinced. I called him. Joseph Hartman still lived in Miami, running a small boat supply store near the old marina. He was cautious on the phone as I introduced myself, but when I explained who I was and why I was calling, his tone changed. "I knew something was wrong with Andrew's death," he said, "but I could never prove it. Shannon was always very careful, very smart. Can you tell me more?" I asked, writing on paper. He took a deep breath. "Andrew and I were very close. He called me every week. In the final months before his death, he said Shannon was pressuring him to change his will. She wanted everything, immediately. Didn't want to wait. They were arguing about it. Did he change the will?" I asked. "No. He said it felt strange how she was rushing. He was planning to talk to a lawyer, maybe even consider divorce. Then he died, and Shannon got everything according to the original will. That doesn't prove—" "I know," he interrupted me. "That's why I never went to the police. There was no evidence. But I'll tell you something else. After Andrew's death, I heard stories about Shannon. She'd been with an older man before Andrew, though it was never official. He also died suddenly. Heart attack. Shannon was a close friend, as some said. I wondered then, but you think she... I couldn't finish the sentence. I don't know what I think, Joseph said quietly, but I know you need to be very, very careful, Mrs. Brennan. If Shannon is planning something, she won't stop just because you oppose her. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. I sat in my apartment, looking at the photograph of Walter on the wall. What hell had I brought into our home? That night, I barely slept. I listened to every sound, every creak in the building. Did Shannon have a copy of my key? Could she enter any time? Could she do anything? Friday morning, Beatrice came early. She had more news. I talked to a friend who works at Derek's construction company. She said, Shannon was there last week, talking to Derek's boss. She introduced herself as his concerned wife, said she was worried about Derek, that he was under a lot of stress taking care of his mother who's losing her memory. Laying the groundwork, I said bitterly. She's telling everyone around Derek that I'm losing my mind, so that when the time comes... Exactly, Beatrice confirmed. But here's what's interesting. My friend heard Shannon mention a nursing home. She said she was looking at options, that it might be best for you. Nursing home, I repeated, the words bitter in my mouth. She wants to separate me from everything, from my apartment, my independence, the ability to talk to Derek alone. But that also gives us a timeline, Beatrice said. She can't just send you to a home. She'll need a doctor to certify you're not capable of caring for yourself. She'll need a legal process. Unless she can convince me to go voluntarily, I said, realizing, if she can convince Derek I'm a danger to myself, that I'd be better off in an institution. You won't let that happen, Beatrice said firmly, because we'll stop her first. Chapter 4. Setting the Trap. The following weeks were the hardest in my life. Every day I'd wake with a weight on my chest, knowing Shannon was out there somewhere, planning her next move. But now I had something she didn't. Knowledge. I knew what she was, and what she was capable of doing. Beatrice and I would meet almost every day, carefully planning each step. I couldn't just be cautious. I had to be smarter. Shannon had been perfecting her manipulation for years. I couldn't simply confront her or show Derek the recordings. Shannon would just turn it around, say I was paranoid, that I'd set up cameras because of my own confusion. No, I had to let her show her true nature herself. I had to get her to make a mistake that would be impossible to deny. In the meantime, life continued. Thanksgiving arrived in Boston, the city filled with the smells of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. I walked through the common, watching families enjoying the holiday decorations, feeling a deep sadness. Would I ever have a normal relationship with my son again? Would Christmas ever feel the same? Shannon called several times during those weeks. Her voice was always cheerful, caring. How are you, Sylvia? Are you eating enough? I know sometimes you forget to eat when you're alone. I'm fine. Thank you, I'd answer, keeping my voice neutral. Derek and I are thinking about you for Christmas. Maybe you could come to us, or we could come to you. We don't want you to be alone for the holidays. We'll see closer to the date, I'd say. But one thing was clear. Shannon was now accelerating her plan. I could feel it in the way she spoke, the urgency in her words when she'd mention care or help. The decisive moment came the third week of November. Derek called me one evening, his voice sounding exhausted. Mom, we need to talk, he said. My heart sank. Of course, son. Do you want to come for coffee? Not just me, he said after a pause. Shannon and I, and also a doctor. A doctor. I asked, though I knew what was coming. Derek sighed. Mom, please don't be angry. Shannon arranged for Dr. Carmichael to visit us, a neurologist, just for a checkup, you understand? We're all getting older, and it's better to be sure. Sure about what? I asked, unable to hide the hurt in my voice. Just your health, Mom, your memory. Last time you were here, you told me the same story twice in an hour. And you forgot you'd left the gas stove on last week. The neighbor had to come and turn it off. The neighbor? I asked, confused. Which neighbor? Mr. Peterson from the apartment next to you. He told Shannon when she visited. Mr. Peterson died a year ago, I said quietly. His daughter sold the apartment. The new tenants are a young couple. I barely see them. I heard a quiet argument on the other end of the line. Derek's muffled voice talking to someone. Shannon, I assumed. Mom, Mr. Peterson told Shannon last week. Maybe you're confused. I'm not confused, I interrupted, louder than I intended. Mr. Peterson died last December. I was at his funeral. You know what I think, Derek. I think your wife is lying to you. Mom, why would she lie about that? Why would she make up a story about a neighbor who's dead? More silence. Then, very quietly, I don't know what to say, Mom, but please, let the doctor come. If there's nothing wrong, you'll prove it, and I'll think about what you said. That was the best I could hope for. We arranged for the doctor to come the following Tuesday. After we hung up, I immediately called Beatrice. It's happening, I said. They're bringing a doctor. Which doctor? Beatrice asked. I gave her the name. Beatrice was quiet for several moments. I know that name, she said finally. Dr. Thomas Carmichael. Works at a private clinic in Back Bay. I've heard he's not the most honest man. There have been stories about him issuing diagnoses for money. My heart sank further. Shannon paid him. Probably. But Sylvia, this could be our opportunity. Opportunity? I asked. How? If the doctor is corrupt, if Shannon paid him to declare you incompetent, we need to catch them together. We need evidence not just that Shannon is manipulating things, but that she's involved in fraud. How do we do that? Beatrice thought for several moments. Do you have a voice recorder? Or we can use your phone to record audio. If the doctor comes and already has formed opinions before examining you, or if he says something showing it was arranged beforehand, that would be evidence. But won't they be careful? People always make mistakes when they think they're talking to someone they consider incompetent, Beatrice said. They think you won't understand, that you won't notice. I spent the next few days preparing. Beatrice showed me how to use the recording function on my smartphone. We also set up another small camera, this time in the bedroom where Shannon told me doctors usually conduct examinations. Tuesday arrived too quickly. I was nervous, my hands shaking as I prepared coffee and cookies, as I would for any visit. But this wasn't a normal visit. This was a battle for my life, my freedom, my independence. Derek arrived first, alone. He hugged me long and hard. Mom, this is just a checkup, he said. Don't worry. I'm not worried. I lied. Where's Shannon? She's coming with the doctor. She picked him up from the clinic. Of course she did, I thought, making sure they had a chance to talk before getting here. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to Shannon, perfectly dressed as always, and a man in his late 40s, carrying a black bag. Sylvia, this is Dr. Carmichael, Shannon said with a big smile. He was very kind to come here instead of having you go to the clinic. Mrs. Brennan, the doctor said, extending his hand. Nice to meet you. This is just a routine checkup. Nothing to worry about. Please come in, I said, stepping back. We sat in the living room, the doctor and Shannon on the couch, Derek in the armchair, me across from them. My phone was in the pocket of my dress, discreetly recording everything. Dr. Carmichael started with basic questions. My name, date of birth, address. Then he began asking about my daily routine, whether I had difficulty remembering things, whether I'd ever gotten lost while out. I answered honestly, calmly. No, I didn't have problems with memory. No, I'd never gotten lost. Yes, I cooked for myself, cleaned the apartment, managed my finances without any difficulty, but I noticed how the doctor and Shannon occasionally glanced at each other. Small, quick looks that spoke volumes more than words. Mrs. Brennan, the doctor said after some time. Your daughter-in-law told me you've had several incidents. Forgetting to turn off the gas stove, for instance. I've never left the gas stove on, I said clearly. I've been cooking for 50 years. It's automatic for me. Perhaps you didn't notice, the doctor said gently, as if speaking to a child. I would have noticed. I insisted. Shannon intervened, her voice full of false concern. Sylvia, I know it's hard to admit when things become difficult, but we're all aging. There's no shame in accepting help. I don't need help, I said. The doctor continued his evaluation, asking questions designed to check cognitive functions. Some were legitimate, remembering a list of words, counting backward, drawing a clock. Others were strange, leading. Your daughter-in-law told me you sometimes don't recognize how to dress for the weather, the doctor said, going out in cold weather without a coat. That's not true, I said. Please, ask my neighbors. They see me every day. Sometimes people with cognitive decline don't realize their mistakes, the doctor said. There and then, I knew. This evaluation was a farce. Dr. Carmichael had already made his decision before he crossed my threshold. Shannon had paid him well, but I played my part, answering every question, calmly, rationally. I let them think I didn't know what they were doing. After an hour, the doctor put his things in his bag. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, "I think it would be useful to run some additional tests. Radiology, maybe a neuropsychological assessment, just to be thorough." "Why?" Derek asked, concern clear in his face. "Do you think something's wrong?" The doctor hesitated, looked at Shannon, then back at Derek. "At this stage, it's hard to say with certainty, but there are some signs that could indicate the beginning of cognitive decline. Nothing serious yet, but at Mrs. Brennan's age, it's better to be cautious." Derek looked defeated. "Mom, I'm fine," I told him, holding his gaze. "Derek, your mother is in perfect health. My mind is clear, and if you don't believe me, let's go together to another doctor, someone we choose together." "That wouldn't be necessary," Shannon said quickly. "Dr. Carmichael is an expert," I said for the last time. "I want a second opinion." The doctor and Shannon looked at each other again. In that look, I saw everything I needed to know. Chapter 5, Day of Reckoning. After they left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, listening to the recording on my phone. Every word was clear. The doctor's leading questions, Shannon's false accusations, the small comment the doctor made when he thought I wasn't listening. "Don't worry, it's all arranged." But I knew this still wasn't enough. I needed something more, something undeniable. I called Beatrice that evening. "I need your help with something," I said. "Something that might be dangerous." Beatrice was quiet for several moments. "What are you planning, Sylvia?" "Shannon thinks I'm weak, that I'm an easy target. It's time to show her she's wrong." The next day, I called Shannon directly. "Shannon, can you come over? I need to talk to you. Alone. Is everything all right?" she asked, unable to hide the excitement in her voice. She probably thought I'd finally cracked, that I was ready to give up. I need to talk about the future," I said, making my voice a little shaky. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I need more help than I thought." "I'll be there in an hour," she said quickly. I used that hour to prepare. Beatrice came with another camera, this one hidden in a vase on the kitchen table. I also had my phone, ready to record. When Shannon arrived, she wore an expression of false concern. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, taking my hand. "Sylvia, I'm so glad you called me. I know this is hard, but making this step is the right thing." "I want to know what you're planning," I said quietly. "A nursing home, isn't it? That's what you want." Her eyes widened just slightly. "We're not planning anything against your will. Please," I interrupted. "We've known each other long enough. Shannon, I know what you're doing." She was silent for a moment. Then her mask fell. Her face became cold, calculating. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I know about Andrew," I said. "Your first husband. I know how he died. I know about the money you spent. I know you're looking for a new—" "Watch what you say," she interrupted me, her voice now sharp. "You have no idea." "I have every idea," I said, my heart pounding but voice steady. "I know you took a copy of my key. I know you've been entering while I was out, changing things, making me look forgetful. I know you paid Dr. Carmichael to declare me incompetent." Shannon stood up, her face red with anger. "You're a crazy old woman. Nobody will believe you. Derek will believe me," I said. "When I show him the evidence." "What evidence?" she said contemptuously. "Your words against mine. I know he loves you, Sylvia, but he's not blind. He sees how you're aging. He sees how you forget things. I have recordings," I said quietly. Her face went pale. "What?" "Cameras. In the apartment. Recording everything. Every time you entered. Every time you touched my things. The conversation with Dr. Carmichael. Everything." "You're lying," she said, but her voice trembled. "Do you want to see?" I asked, reaching for the laptop Beatrice had left. "No," she said quickly, stepping back. "You can't." "I can, and I will," I said, standing up. "I'll show Derek. I'll show the police. I'll show everyone what you are." Shannon looked at me, her eyes full of hatred. "You think it will matter," she said finally. You think Derek will choose you over me. I'm his wife. I share his bed. I share his life. You're just his old mother who's becoming a burden." Her words hurt, but I didn't let it show. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly. "Maybe he'll choose you, but at least he'll know the truth. At least he'll know who you really are." Shannon stood there for several moments, her fists clenched at her sides. Then she said something that froze my blood. "You think you're smart. You think you've beaten me. There are other ways, Sylvia. Accidents happen, especially to elderly people. They fall downstairs. They forget to take their medications. So many things can go wrong." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm giving you advice," she said coldly. "Be careful, and keep your evidence to yourself." Then she left, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. As soon as she left, Beatrice came out of the bedroom where she'd been waiting. "Did you get everything?" I asked. "Every word," she said, holding up another phone that had been recording, including the threat. "Then it's time," I said. "Time for Derek to know the truth." But Beatrice stopped me. "Wait," she said. "If you show him the recordings right now, she'll spin it. She'll say something. That you set up cameras to trap her. That you're paranoid. We need something more." "What more?" I asked, frustrated. "We need to catch her in the act. Doing something undeniable. Something even Derek can't ignore." That night, Beatrice and I planned our final move. It was risky, maybe even dangerous, but I had no choice. If I let Shannon continue, who knew how far she'd go? I called Derek the next morning. "Son, can you come tonight? Alone? Without Shannon? I need to talk to you about something important." He hesitated. "Mom, if this is about Dr. Carmichael, it's not just about that," I said. "Please, Derek, 1 hour of your time. That's all I'm asking." He agreed, though reluctantly. We arranged for him to come at 8 o'clock. The rest of the day was excruciating. I spent hours checking and rechecking our plan. Beatrice made sure all the cameras were working. We also contacted Joseph Hartman, Andrew's brother, asking if he could come to Boston. He said he would. At 6 o'clock, I called Shannon. "I know what you're planning tonight," I said, making my voice filled with panic. "I know you told Derek to come. You're going to try to... Please, Shannon, don't do this. I'm leaving. I'll leave the apartment. I'm going to a friend's in Worcester. You can have everything. Just leave me alone." "I didn't talk to Derek," Shannon said, but I could hear the lie in her voice. "And I don't know what you're talking about. Please," I begged. "I'll give you the keys to the apartment. I'll sign papers. Whatever you want. Just don't hurt me." I heard her breathing change. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind. "Where are these evidence you mentioned?" she asked finally. "Here, in the apartment, in the safe. Please, if you come, we can talk. We can work this out. I'll be there at 7:30, she said and hung up. Beatrice looked at me with concern. "Are you sure about this?" "No," I said honestly, "but I don't have a choice." The next hour was the longest in my life. Beatrice and I sat in silence, waiting. All the cameras were ready, my phone in my pocket, recording. The plan was set. At exactly 7:30, I heard the sound of a key in the lock. Shannon, using the copy she'd made. Beatrice quickly hid in the bedroom. I stayed in the living room, waiting. Shannon entered, closing the door quietly behind her. She looked around, making sure I was alone. "Where is it?" she asked. "Where's what?" I said, keeping my voice shaky. "The evidence? The recordings? Tell me where they are." I stood up, walking toward the bookshelf, in the safe behind the books. Shannon followed me. I reached out as if to open the safe, but instead, I turned to face her. "There is no safe, Shannon." Her face became confused, then angry. "What did you do?" At that moment, the apartment door opened. Derek stood there, 2 police officers behind him, and Joseph Hartman, Andrew's brother. "Mom?" Derek asked, looking between me and Shannon. "What's going on?" Shannon immediately tried to put her pleasant mask back on. "Derek, I didn't know. Your mother called me, said she needed help. With a copy of a key you took?" I asked quietly. "A key I never gave you?" Derek looked at Shannon, confused. "Shannon, do you have a key to Mom's apartment?" Sylvia gave it to me," she said quickly. "A few months ago, She said it would be good if I never gave you a key, I said clearly. You took a copy when you were here, one of the many times you entered while I was out. That's not true, Shannon said, her voice becoming hysterical. She's lying. She's old, confused. Then can you explain this? I said, opening the laptop. I showed her the recordings. Shannon entering the apartment with a key. Shannon changing entries in my notebook. Shannon photographing my documents. And finally, the recording from yesterday, her threat. Derek watched in silence, his face growing paler with each recording. Mom, is this real? He asked finally. It's real, I said. And there's more. Before she met you, Shannon was married. Her husband died suddenly, leaving her all his money. Joseph Hartman stepped forward. I was Andrew Hartman's brother. Shannon was married to my brother for 3 years before he died of a heart attack. I always suspected something wasn't right, but I could never prove it. When Mrs. Brennan contacted me, I knew I had to come. Derek looked at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Shannon, is this true? Shannon stood there, tears running down her face. But they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of rage. You're so stupid, Derek, she said finally, her voice full of contempt. You thought I loved you. You thought I chose you because you're special. You were just convenient. A job, an apartment, a mother with money. That's all you were. Derek looked like he'd been struck. One of the police officers stepped forward. Mrs. Aldridge, we need you to come with us. There are questions we need to ask about your activities. As they led her away, Shannon looked at me one more time. In her eyes, I saw pure hatred. You thought you were smart, she said quietly. You thought you won. But this isn't over, Sylvia. It will never be over. To Chapter 6, Aftermath and Healing. The weeks after Shannon's arrest were some of the hardest in my life, in ways I hadn't expected. I thought I'd feel liberated, proud that I'd defended myself. Instead, I just felt empty and deeply sad. Derek was devastated. After the police took Shannon away, he stayed in my apartment long into the night, sitting on the couch where Walter always sat, staring at the walls. How didn't I see it? He whispered, more to himself than to me. How was I so blind? I sat beside him, holding his hand like I had when he was a little boy with scraped knees or a broken heart. Love makes you blind sometimes, I said quietly. She was very good at what she did. She fooled a lot of people, not just you. But you saw it, he said, looking at me with eyes full of pain. You knew, and I didn't believe you. I thought you were losing your mind, my own mother, and I believed her over you. You loved her, I said. That's not your fault. I should have believed you, he said, tears finally coming. Mom, I'm so sorry. I hugged him tightly, like I had when he was 7 and had a nightmare. My son, my boy, who was now a grown man with a broken heart. I already forgive you, I whispered. I always will. In the following days, the truth about Shannon began to unravel. The police started a detailed investigation, not just into her actions toward me, but also into the death of her first husband. While nothing could be definitively proven about Andrew's death, there were enough irregularities to reopen the case. Dr. Carmichael was also arrested. It turned out Shannon wasn't his first client. He was part of a fraud network, providing false medical diagnoses for those willing to pay. Several other families came forward, telling similar stories. Beatrice's investigation revealed even more. Shannon had debts I didn't know about, credit cards, loans from questionable lenders. She was desperate for money and saw my apartment and savings as her salvation. The lawyer I hired, a stern woman named Patricia Morrison, no relation to Beatrice, explained that Shannon could face serious charges: breaking and entering, attempted fraud, maybe even elder abuse. But what did all this mean for Derek? 2 weeks after the arrest, we sat together in my apartment. It was late December, and outside the first snow had fallen, covering Boston in a quiet white blanket. I need to talk to you about something, Derek said, his voice quiet. I've filed for divorce. I nodded. That's the right thing. But I don't know how to move forward, Mom. How to live with this knowledge. Every memory is now tainted. Every moment I thought was real was a lie. Not everything was a lie, I said carefully. Your emotions were real. Your love was real. even if hers wasn't. How will I ever trust anyone again? He asked. I didn't have an answer for that. Really, how do you open up after such betrayal? Time, I finally said. And help. Maybe talking to someone, a therapist. He nodded, though I could see he wasn't convinced. Christmas came quietly that year. Usually Derek and Walter and I would celebrate together. The table full of food, the house filled with laughter and warmth. This year, it was just Derek and me, and the heavy cloud of what had happened. But we tried. I made his favorite dishes: roast beef, mashed potatoes, apple pie for dessert. We listened to old Christmas songs on the radio. We talked about Walter, sharing memories of when he was alive and our world was whole. Do you remember the year Dad tried to put Christmas lights on the roof? Derek asked, a small smile on his face, and fell in the snow. How could I forget? He was covered head to toe. He looked like a snowman. We laughed, and for a moment, it was like the old days. But then the silence would return, and the weight of the present would settle again between us. Mom, Derek said later that evening, as we were cleaning up, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you know? How were you so sure something was wrong? I thought carefully before answering. There was a feeling, I said, deep inside me. I knew something wasn't right, but also, I followed patterns. Your father taught me that. He always said, watch for patterns, Sylvia. People can lie, but patterns don't. Derek nodded thoughtfully. I'm sorry I didn't see those patterns, he said quietly. In the new year, life slowly began to return to some routine. Shannon was in custody, awaiting trial. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was merciless. There was too much evidence, too many victims. Joseph Hartman became a friend. He'd fly in sometimes from Miami, and we'd meet for coffee, sharing memories of Andrew and stories of our fight against Shannon. Your brother would be proud of you, I told him one January afternoon, as we sat in a warm cafe in the North End. I hope so, he said quietly. I always felt I let him down, not fighting harder for justice when he died. This is my way of making it right. I wasn't alone. Beatrice was there almost every day, my rock and friend. My neighbors, when they heard what happened, would come by with food and offers to help. Mrs. Martinez from the second floor would bring me soup. The young couple who'd moved into Mr. Peterson's apartment, their names were Nina and Lucas Carter, regularly asked if I needed anything from the market. But the hardest thing was watching Derek struggle. He was lost, his confidence shattered. Work suffered. He'd start missing calls, missing meetings. His boss, Mr. Thompson, called me once, concerned. I don't know how to help him, he said. He's always been so reliable. But now, he needs time, I said, though I was worried too. In February, I suggested something to Derek. Maybe we need a change, I said. A small trip. Not far. Just somewhere else for a few days. He hesitated. I don't know, Mom. Work. Work will be there when you get back. But you need this, son. We both need this. Finally, he agreed. I booked a small cabin in the Berkshires, in a small mountain town called Lenox. Walter and I had been there on our honeymoon, so many years ago. It was a place of happy memories. We drove down in mid-February. Winter in the Berkshires was quiet. The tourist town almost empty. We walked through the old streets, looking at the mountains covered in snow under gray skies. Do you remember when we were here with Dad? Derek asked one evening, as we ate dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the valley. I remember, I said, you were 8 years old, so happy building snowmen. I was so small then. Everything was so simple. Maybe it wasn't as simple as you think, I said gently. Life has always been complicated, Derek. You just didn't notice as a child. How did you cope, Mom? He asked suddenly. When Dad died, how did you keep going? My eyes filled with tears. Honestly, I didn't know how. Every morning I'd wake and think, I can't do this. I can't live without him. But then I'd get up. I'd make coffee. I'd take one step, then another. And slowly, day by day, I learned to live with the pain instead of fighting against it. Derek looked out at the mountains, his face full of thought. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself, he said finally. I'm not asking you to forgive yourself right away, I said. I'm just asking you to be gentle with yourself. You didn't do anything wrong, Derek. You loved someone. That's not a crime. But I chose her over you. And now you're choosing me, I said, holding his hand. That's what matters. Chapter 7. The Trial and Confrontation. Shannon's trial began in April, when the cherry blossoms started blooming in the Boston Public Garden. I decided to attend, despite Beatrice's warning that it might be difficult. I needed to be there. I needed to watch Shannon face the consequences of her actions. The courtroom was small, but full. Besides me and Derek, there were Joseph Hartman, several other people Shannon had defrauded through the years, and of course, the lawyers, prosecutors, and judge. When they brought Shannon in, I barely recognized her. The woman who'd always been so perfectly dressed, with perfect makeup and hair, now looked tired and pale. But when she saw me, I still saw that same hatred in her eyes. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified on the first day, telling my story in detail. I showed the camera recordings. I explained how I'd felt, watching my daughter-in-law systematically trying to destroy my credibility. Shannon's lawyer, an older man with fashionably gray mustache, tried to discredit me. "Mrs. Brennan, aren't you a woman of 68 years?" he asked, as if my age was proof of incompetence in itself. "I am," I answered calmly. "And isn't it possible you could have been confused about some of these events?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not confused. I set up cameras because I suspected something was happening. Those cameras confirmed my suspicions. But is it possible that you yourself set up these situations? That you moved things yourself, then accused my client? She threatened my life." I interrupted him. "On camera, with audio. How would I have set that up?" The lawyer had no answer for that. On the second day, Dr. Carmichael testified. His confession was devastating for Shannon. Under pressure from the prosecutor, he admitted Shannon had paid him to diagnose me as cognitively impaired, regardless of my actual condition. "How much did she pay you?" the prosecutor asked. $5,000, Dr. Carmichael said quietly, unable to look toward the courtroom. "She told me it would just be paperwork, that nobody would be hurt. But someone would have been hurt, wouldn't they?" The prosecutor insisted. "Mrs. Brennan could have lost her independence, her property, her dignity." Dr. Carmichael looked at the floor. "I'm sorry. I should have known better." Derek testified on the third day. It was hard watching him there. My son, speaking before the entire courtroom about his shattered marriage. "Mr. Brennan," the prosecutor asked, "when did you first start suspecting something was wrong?" "I didn't," Derek said, his voice filled with pain. "That's the thing. I didn't suspect anything until my mother showed me the evidence. I believed my wife completely." "Why do you think you did?" Derek looked at Shannon. "Because I loved her, or thought I loved her. Now I don't know what was real in our marriage and what was a lie." Shannon looked back, her face impassive. She showed no emotion, no remorse. The final witness was Joseph Hartman. His testimony about Andrew's death and about Shannon's actions afterward helped establish a pattern of behavior. "My brother was a healthy man," Joseph said, tears in his eyes. "Yet he died suddenly, just months after he started questioning his marriage. I always thought there was something unexplainable about it. Now, listening to Mrs. Brennan's story, I can't help but see the parallels. When it came time for Shannon to testify in her own defense, I was curious what she'd say. Would she finally show remorse? Would she admit anything? No. Her story was that it had all been a misunderstanding, that she was just trying to help, that she'd gotten the key from me, but I'd forgotten, that her changes in my apartment were simply small movements while cleaning, that her threat was just a moment of frustration, that she didn't mean it seriously, but her cold, calculating demeanor on the stand only made her less credible. It was clear to everyone in the courtroom. This woman wasn't a victim of misunderstanding. She was a predator. The courtroom was silent as the judge read his verdict. "Mrs. Aldridge," he said, his voice sad but firm, "your actions represent a violation of basic trust. You systematically attempted to take advantage of an elderly woman, manipulating her son and abusing her trust. I find you guilty on all charges." Shannon showed no reaction. She just stood there, straight-backed, staring ahead. "Sentencing will be determined in 2 weeks," the judge continued. "But I want to be clear. Such actions, especially against the most vulnerable members of our society, will not be tolerated." As they led her away, Shannon looked at me one more time. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes. Not remorse, but maybe recognition. Recognition that I had beaten her. Outside the courthouse, Derek hugged me tightly. "It's over, Mom," he whispered. Finally, it's over. But it wasn't over. Not really. The consequences of Shannon's actions would stay with us long after the judge sentenced her. Chapter 8. The Difficult Forgiveness. 2 weeks after the trial, the judge handed down Shannon's sentence. 5 years in prison for attempted fraud, breaking and entering, and elder abuse. With good behavior, she could be released in 3 years. It sounded like so little, after everything she'd done. But lawyer Patricia explained that it would be difficult to prove more serious charges without more direct evidence. "The law isn't perfect," she said, "but at least it's justice, even if it's not as much as we'd like." Derek's divorce was finalized in May. Shannon didn't fight it, probably knowing there was no point. But she left with one last blow. She sold her story to a tabloid newspaper, full of lies and distortions, portraying herself as a victim of a manipulative mother-in-law and a naive husband. When I saw the article, with its sensationalist headline, "Mother-in-law from Hell, How One Woman Destroyed My Marriage," I felt the old anger return. "Don't read it," Derek told me, taking the newspaper from my hands. "She's just trying to hurt us one more time. Let's not let her." But it was hard to ignore. In the weeks that followed, I noticed how people looked at me differently on the street, in the store. Some with pity, which was almost worse than hostility. I didn't want to be seen as a victim. I wanted to be seen as a survivor. Derek struggled with his own demons. He started seeing a therapist, Mrs. Eleanor Bradford, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. He'd tell me about his sessions sometimes, how he was working through his feelings of guilt and shame. "Mrs. Bradford says I need to forgive myself," he told me one evening as we ate dinner in my apartment. "She says I was manipulated and that holding on to guilt doesn't help me." "Is it helping?" I asked. "The therapy. Slowly," he admitted. "Some days are harder than others. But yes, I think it's helping." I was proud of him. My son, facing his pain instead of running from it. But one question remained between us. Unspoken, but always present. Could he forgive himself? I wasn't sure. Part of me, deep in my heart, still hurt from the memory of how he hadn't believed me. How he'd been ready to send me to a nursing home because Shannon said so. How he'd chosen her over me. Beatrice would warn me when she'd see those thoughts on my face. "It's not fair to him, Sylvia," she'd say. "He was deceived, just like you. Maybe even more because he thought he loved that person." "I know," I'd say. "But knowing it and feeling it are two different things." In June, Derek suggested something unusual. "Mom, I want to take you somewhere," he said. "The place where you and Dad met." I looked at him surprised. "Worcester?" He nodded. I thought, maybe it would be good to see those roots, to remember where we come from. We hadn't been back to Worcester together since Walter's funeral, the small city in central Massachusetts where I grew up, where I met Walter at a local dance when I was 20 years old. We went one warm June weekend. We drove through the green landscapes, passing through small towns with their old churches and new houses. It was quiet, peaceful, like a step back in time. In Worcester, we walked through the old downtown. Everything was smaller than I remembered, but also somehow more intimate. I showed Derek the house where I grew up, now renovated by some young family, the shoe store where my father worked as a cobbler, the church where Walter and I got married. "It looked so different then," I said, standing in front of the church. Everything was new and exciting. The whole world felt like it was open before us. "Do you ever think about what would have been different?" Derek asked. "If you'd never met Dad? Or if you'd gone somewhere else?" "No," I said without hesitation. "Every decision I made, every turn in the road, brought me to where I am. And despite everything, the pain, the losses, the betrayal, I wouldn't change it, because all of it made me who I am." Derek was quiet for several moments. "Mom," he said finally, "I know I hurt you. I know I didn't believe you when I should have. And I understand if you can't forgive me." I interrupted him, putting my hand on his cheek. "Derek, I already forgave you. Maybe it will take time for me to fully forget the pain, but forgiveness, that came the moment I saw you, standing in the doorway of my apartment with the police, realizing you'd finally seen the truth. In that moment, I knew you weren't lost to me. Tears burst into his eyes. I don't deserve you, Mom. It's not about deserving, I said gently. It's about love, and I'll always love you, son. Always. We hugged there in front of the old church, under the same bell that had rung at my wedding so many years earlier. I felt the weight I'd been carrying these months finally lifting. Chapter 9. Rebuilding. Through the summer, life slowly began to feel normal again. I continued my regular routines, morning walks to the public market, coffee with Beatrice on Tuesdays, reading in my favorite armchair by the window as the sun set over Boston. But there were also changes. Good changes. Derek would come for dinner several times a week. Not out of duty or guilt, but because he genuinely wanted to. We'd talk about his work, about his therapy sessions, about his plans for the future. I met someone, he told me one August evening, his face reddening. Oh, I said, trying to keep my face neutral. Her name is Margaret Foster. She works at an architecture firm that collaborates with my company. She's different, quiet, gentle, real. She sounds nice, I said honestly. She's not like Shannon, he rushed to add. Not at all. Margaret is. Her kindness is genuine. I can see it. I trust your judgment, I said. You've learned the hard way what to look for. A few weeks later, I met Margaret. She was exactly as Derek described, a quiet woman with a warm smile and honest eyes. When she came to my apartment for lunch, she brought flowers and homemade bread. Mrs. Brennan, she said, it's so nice to finally meet you. Derek has talked so much about you. I watched how Derek looked at her, full of love and security. There was no desperation in this relationship, no rush, just a calm, stable feeling of two people who'd found each other at the right time. I also made changes in my own life. I started volunteer work at a local senior center, helping other women in my age group who were facing similar situations. Betrayal by family, financial exploitation, abuse. One woman, Mrs. Helen Douglas, was especially grateful. I don't know what I would have done without your help, she told me one day, tears in her eyes. My sons were trying to convince me to sell my house, saying it was for my own good, but I knew something was wrong. Your story gave me the courage to ask questions. Helping these women, I found new purpose. My experience, as painful as it was, could help others, could prevent them from going through the same thing. Beatrice and I became closer than ever. She wasn't just my friend. She was my sister in all the ways that mattered. We'd spend hours talking about life, love, losses, and hopes for the future. Do you ever think about remarrying? She asked me one October afternoon, as we drank tea in her apartment. At my age, I said with a smile, who would want an old woman like me? You're not old, Beatrice said sharply. You're 68, not 98, and I've seen how Mr. Reynolds from our senior club looks at you. Oh, B, I said, laughing. Mr. Reynolds looks at every woman, but as I said it, I felt a little warmth in my chest. Maybe it wasn't too late for new love, not a replacement for Walter. No one could ever replace him, but companionship, friendship, maybe even something more. Life wasn't perfect. I still had bad days. When memories of Shannon's betrayal would creep back, when I'd wonder if I could ever fully trust again. Derek also had his difficult moments, when doubt and insecurity would overwhelm him. But through it all, we were there for each other. That was the most important thing. Chapter 10. The Unexpected Letter. In November, almost a year after Shannon's trial, I received something unexpected. A letter from prison. It was from Shannon. My first instinct was to throw it away. Whatever she'd written, I knew it would be manipulation, another attempt to hurt me or control the situation. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was a need for closure. Or maybe, deep down, part of me needed to understand why she'd done what she'd done. I opened the letter. Her handwriting was elegant, controlled, like everything about her. Dear Sylvia, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I understand that, but there are things I need to say, things I couldn't say in the courtroom. You weren't right about everything, but you were right about something. I was desperate. When I met Derek, I was at rock bottom. Debts, no prospects, no hope. I saw him as a solution, yes, but not the way you think. At first, it was simple. Smile. be what he wants, secure my future. But then, something changed. I started really caring about him. Maybe even loving him, in my own broken way. And you, Sylvia, you were an obstacle. As long as you were there, independent and strong, Derek would never be fully mine. He'd look to you, seek your approval, your opinion. So I tried to remove you, not physically, as you might have thought, just out of the way. It was wrong. I know that now. But in that moment, I couldn't see another way. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know. It wasn't personal. I never hated you. You were just in the way. Shannon, I read the letter several times, trying to understand what she was feeling. There was no real apology there. No genuine remorse. Just explanation. Rationalization. I showed Derek the next evening. What do you think? I asked, watching his face as he read. His jaw tightened. I think she's still trying to manipulate, he said finally. I tried to really care about him. That's a lie. If she really cared, she never would have done what she did. Maybe, I said, or maybe her version of caring was twisted. Maybe she never learned how to love healthily. That doesn't excuse her, Derek said firmly. No, I confirmed. It doesn't. Are you going to respond? He asked. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to write back, tell Shannon exactly what I thought of her explanation, but what would that accomplish? No, I said finally. The best response is no response. She doesn't deserve my time or emotional energy anymore. Derek nodded, satisfied. But something about the letter bothered me. Not the content so much as the fact that Shannon felt the need to write it. After everything, she was still trying to control the narrative, make sure her voice was heard. She couldn't just let go. That realization was sobering. No matter how many years Shannon spent in prison, when she got out, she'd still be the same person. Maybe a little older, a little more bitter, but essentially unchanged. I needed to be careful. We all needed to be careful. Chapter 11. Looking Forward. Winter returned to Boston, but this time, it didn't bring with it the weight and fear that had been there last year. Instead, I felt peace. Christmas was an exciting event. Derek and Margaret, Beatrice and her family, even Joseph Hartman, who flew in from Miami. My apartment was full of laughter, warmth, the smell of good food. As we sat around the table, sharing roast turkey and stuffing, I looked at all the faces around me. These were people I loved, people who loved me, people who had stood by me through the darkest times. I want to propose a toast, Derek said, standing with his wine glass. To Mom, the strongest woman I know, the woman who taught me what it means to truly love and forgive. Everyone raised their glasses. To Sylvia, I felt tears come to my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. I also want to add something, I said, standing up. This year taught me a lot. About trust, about betrayal, about strength I didn't know I had. But most importantly, it taught me about love. True love isn't perfect. It's not always easy. Sometimes it hurts. But true love stays. It fights. It forgives. I looked at Derek. Thank you, son, for staying, for fighting, for loving me even when it wasn't easy. His eyes were moist. Thank you, Mom, for never giving up on me. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I sat alone in my living room. The city outside was quiet, covered in fresh snow. Walter's clock tick-tocked peacefully on the wall. It wasn't the same as before. My life, it couldn't be. Too much had changed. Too much had been lost. But it was good. Maybe even better in some ways. I'd learned I was stronger than I thought. I'd learned I could stand up for myself, even against someone I loved. I'd learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, but the greatest strength of all. And I'd learned that, even in the darkest moments, there is light. Sometimes it comes from unexpected places. A friend who stands by you. A son who finally understands. A stranger who becomes an ally. In January, something wonderful happened. Derek and Margaret got engaged. It wasn't big, dramatic proposal, just a simple, romantic moment on a walk through the common, looking at the frozen pond. Margaret cried. Derek cried. And when he told me, I cried too. I want you to be my best woman, he said. No one else can be, without you. I never would have found the courage for a new beginning. I'd be honored, I said. They planned a spring wedding, a small ceremony at a historic church in Back Bay. Nothing grand or excessive, just the people they loved, celebrating the love they'd found. As the date drew closer, Derek became a little nervous. "Mom, do you think I know what real love looks like?" he told me one evening. "After Shannon, sometimes I worry I can't trust my own judgment." "Sweetheart," I said, holding his hands, "Shannon didn't teach you what love isn't. But that's equally important as knowing what love is. Now you know the difference. Now you can appreciate the real thing." "Margaret is the real thing," he said quietly. "I know," I said with a smile. "I see the way she looks at you. That's not manipulation or calculation. That's genuine, pure love." I also made new beginnings. Mr. Reynolds, a 72-year-old man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, started joining Beatrice and me for our Tuesday coffees. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, but it was pleasant. A friendship that could, maybe, become something more. Was I ready for that? I wasn't sure, but I'd learned that not everything has to be certain to be worthwhile. Chapter 12. Final Lessons. Derek and Margaret's wedding was on an April morning, with sunlight shining through the old stained glass windows of the church, casting colorful lights across the stone floor. I stood beside Derek as his best woman, watching as he said his vows. His voice was steady, full of conviction. There was no doubt there, no fear, just love. When they kissed, the whole church applauded. I felt Walter's presence there, as if he was standing beside me, proudly watching our son as he began a new chapter. After the ceremony, we had a small reception at a restaurant overlooking the harbor. There weren't many people, 30 or so, but each one was important to us. Beatrice hugged me tightly. "We did it," she whispered. "Didn't we?" "We did," I confirmed. Later, Derek pulled me aside. "Mom, I want to tell you something," he said. "All of this, everything that happened with Shannon, in a strange way, I think it made us closer, made me appreciate you more, understand you better. Pain can sometimes do that," I said. "It can destroy us, or make us stronger. I'm glad it made us stronger." Margaret joined us, taking Derek's hand. "Thank you, Sylvia," she said, "for raising such a wonderful man, for teaching him what it means to be strong, but also gentle. I'll do my best to make him happy." "You already make him happy," I said honestly. "I can see it." As the day turned into evening, I sat with Beatrice and Mr. Reynolds, watching the young couple dancing. "Beautiful story," Mr. Reynolds said. "After so much darkness, finding light. All stories deserve a happy ending," I said, but Beatrice looked at me, her eyes serious. "It's not really an ending, is it?" she said quietly. "Shannon will be released in a couple years. What then?" I was quiet for several moments. I'd thought about it, of course. Nights when I couldn't sleep, worried about what Shannon would do when she was free. "Then we'll be ready," I said finally. "We've learned our lessons. We know the signs. We won't be caught unprepared again. But more importantly," I continued, "I'm not living in fear anymore. Shannon took enough of my time, my energy. I won't let her take any more." Mr. Reynolds nodded approvingly. "Wisdom comes with experience. And you, Sylvia, have plenty of experience." As the evening drew to a close, Derek asked me for one last dance. We were on the dance floor, swaying slowly to an old love song that Walter and I used to love. "Mom," he said quietly, "I love you, and I'm sorry for everything." "Shh," I said. "No more apologies. Just forward from here." "Forward," he repeated, "with you beside me. Always." I promised. Months passed. Summer brought warm days and long evenings. Derek and Margaret moved into a new apartment, not far from me. They'd come often, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes for a whole evening. My volunteer work at the senior center continued, helping more women find their strength and voice. Every story I heard reminded me why my fight had been worth it. Joseph Hartman became a regular correspondent. He'd write me every month, sharing stories of his life in Miami, sending photographs of the ocean and sunsets. In his letters, I felt a kinship of survivors, people who'd faced the dark side of human nature and found a way to continue. Mr. Reynolds, I called him Stephen now, became a closer friend. We weren't in a romantic relationship, not traditionally, but there was warmth between us, companionship that filled the void Walter's death had left. It's not a replacement, I explained to Beatrice one day. There'll never be a replacement for Walter, but it's a new chapter, different, but also good. Beatrice understood. She'd been a widow herself for 10 years, and knew the balance between remembering the past and embracing the present. One September afternoon, while organizing papers in my apartment, I found an old journal I'd started keeping during my fight with Shannon. Reading through the pages, I saw the journey I'd taken, from fear and doubt to courage and action, from betrayal to forgiveness, from darkness to light. On the last page, I wrote a new entry. I learned that strength doesn't come from never falling, but from getting up every time we fall. I learned that love, real love, endures through trials and emerges stronger. I learned that old age doesn't mean weakness. It can mean wisdom, resilience, depth of character that only comes with years. And most importantly, I learned it's never too late for a new beginning. At 68 years old, I discovered within myself a strength I didn't know existed. I found new purpose, new relationships, a new way of being in the world. Shannon tried to take everything from me. Instead, unwittingly, she gave me a gift, the opportunity to discover who I really am, beneath all the roles and expectations. I'm not just a mother, not just a widow. I'm Sylvia Brennan, a woman who survived, who fought, and who found her way back to the light. And that's something no one can ever take from me. I closed the journal, feeling a peace I hadn't felt in years. Outside my window, Boston continued its business. People hurried through the streets, trolleys hummed, church bells rang out the time. Life continued, and I continued too. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just existing, but living. That was the real victory. Not over Shannon, but over fear, over doubt, over all the limiting beliefs about what an old woman can or cannot do. I was free, finally, completely free. And as the sun set over the city, casting golden light across my living room, I felt Walter's hand on my shoulder, his voice whispering in my ear. I'm proud of you, Sylvia. I always have been. I smiled through my tears. I know. My love. I know. Daru. Epilogue. 3 years later, I received another letter from prison. This time, it wasn't from Shannon, but from a prison social worker. Shannon Aldridge had been released on parole. The social worker wrote to me as part of her release conditions, ensuring she understood she must maintain distance from me and my family. It wasn't threatening, just a notification. I showed the letter to Derek. How do you feel? He asked, concern clear in his face. Honestly, I said, I don't feel anything. She's part of my past. I'm focused on my future. And that was the truth. Shannon no longer had power over me. She was just another person in the world, struggling with her own demons. Life continued, richer than ever. Derek and Margaret announced they were expecting a baby, my first grandchild. Beatrice and I planned a trip to Maine for the next summer. Stephen suggested we join a local dance group for seniors. Every day brought new joys, new experiences, new reminders that life, even in your 70s, can be full of wonder. And when I'd think back on everything that happened, the betrayal, the battle, the victory, I knew one thing with certainty. I survived. Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. I survived and emerged stronger, wiser, more complete. That was the real story. Not about how someone tried to destroy me, but about how I rebuilt myself, stone by stone, day by day, until I stood again, unshakable, undefeated, unbreakably mine. And that's the lesson I want to pass on. No matter how old you are, no matter what you've been through, it's never too late to stand up for yourself. It's never too late to be strong. It's never too late to live on your own terms. You are worthy. You are capable. You are enough. Never forget that. The end.